The last month before my wedding to Sarah felt like a roller coaster of emotions. I clearly remember the day we decided to choose the flowers for the ceremony. The sun was shining brightly, and the sweet scent of fresh flowers filled the air. We were in the flower shop, surrounded by arrangements of all colors and shapes. Sarah was radiant. Her smile lit up the room, and I couldn't help but feel like the luckiest man in the world. "Look at these daisies, Alex. They're so happy," Sarah exclaimed, holding a bouquet of yellow daisies. I watched her in awe, the way her eyes sparkled as she talked about the details of our big day. "They're beautiful, but what do you think about mixing them with some white roses? A touch of elegance, don't you think?" I suggested, trying to capture her attention. She agreed, and together we began to put together what would be our dream bouquet. As we picked out the flowers, I couldn't help but think about how essential trust was to a healthy relationship. "You know, Sarah, it's important that we trust each other, especially now that we're about to take this big step," I said, trying to broach a serious topic amidst all the joy. She hesitated for a moment, a nervous smile appearing on her face. "Of course, Alex. Confidence is everything, isn't it?" There was a slight hesitation in her tone, but I didn't pay much attention to it at the time. I was so intoxicated by the happiness of the moment that the dark clouds that had been forming in my mind were quickly dispelled. In the days that followed, we continued with the preparations. We tested the wedding menu at a restaurant we liked so much. The waiter brought a variety of dishes, and Sarah made sure to try each one. "This is perfect," she said, taking a bite and smiling with satisfaction. I admired her, thinking about how excited I was to start our life together. However, the joy he felt began to be overshadowed by a restlessness he couldn't explain. One night, while reviewing some wedding details, I received an anonymous message on my cell phone. The screen illuminated my face in the darkness of the room. The message read, "Sarah is with Mark. Be careful." I was paralyzed for a moment. The name Mark echoed in my mind. Sarah's former coworker who had always made me feel uncomfortable. What should I do with that information? Doubt began to eat away at my confidence, a shadow hanging over what should have been one of the happiest moments of my life. I tried to push the thoughts away, but they kept coming back. "It's a lie," I muttered to myself, but the feeling of betrayal began to take root in my heart. In the following days, I couldn't shake the suspicion. Every laugh Sarah made, every touch she gave me, now seemed to carry a different weight. I observed her more closely, trying to decipher her gestures, looking for any sign that would confirm my suspicions. "Are you okay, love?" she asked me, with a worried look. "Yes, I'm just thinking about some things about the wedding," I replied, trying not to reveal the storm that was brewing inside me. The truth is that, even surrounded by the joy of preparations, a part of me began to feel lost, as if I were about to enter a deep and unknown abyss. Whatever was happening, I knew something wasn't right, and the truth, as painful as it was about to be revealed. The afternoon was cloudy, and a strange restlessness accompanied me as I drove slowly through the city. The gray sky reflected my emotional state, a mixture of expectation and anxiety that seemed to intensify with each kilometer covered. I couldn't ignore Sarah's behavior the last few days. There was something in his gaze, a nervous gleam that I couldn't decipher, and it made me uneasy. I decided I needed to find out what was going on. After a few turns, I saw Sarah's car parked in front of a bar I knew. My instincts kicked in. "It can't be," I thought, as my heart started to race. I parked a few spaces away and, holding my breath, walked towards the spot. The entrance was surrounded by people, but the view through the window gave me direct access to the truth I feared. There they were, Sarah and Mark, laughing and talking intimately. Butterflies rose through my body when I saw Sarah's hand touch Mark's arm. I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. The image of two bodies close together, completely at ease with each other, burned itself into my mind like a dagger. The betrayal was there, exposed before my eyes, and I couldn't look away. "How could you, Sarah?" I muttered to myself, as reality settled into my chest like a sharp blade. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing, but the evidence was undeniable. My shattered heart made me retreat, and I returned home not knowing exactly how I felt. Along the way, A mixture of anger and sadness took over me, as if I were being pulled into an endless abyss. When I got home, anger took over me. Sarah came in soon after, looking radiant, as if nothing was happening. "Hey, love, how was your day?" she asked, a smile on her lips. The contrast between her apparent happiness and the pain I felt was unbearable. "Don't lie to me, Sarah. I know about you and Mark." My voice came out louder than I intended, reverberating off the walls of the room. Her smile instantly fell, and what was left was an expression of shock and, perhaps, fear. "What do you mean?" she replied, trying to look away. "I saw you at the bar. There's no way to hide it anymore. You betrayed me, didn't you?" The tone of my voice was firm, but I felt vulnerability tighten in my chest. She took a deep breath, and for a moment silence filled the space between us. "Alex, I didn't want you to know like this." The hesitation in her voice was almost palpable, and I could tell that, even at that moment, she was still trying to find a way out. "So it is true. You were with him." I screamed, the pain spilling over into a mix of anger and despair. "How can you do this to me? We're about to get married." "I don't know what to say, Alex. I lost control." "It wasn't supposed to happen," she said, her voice shaking, but even in that moment, I couldn't feel compassion. "Lost control? That's no excuse, Sarah. You deceived me, and that is unforgivable." The words came out of me as if they were an outburst, a cry of pain that needed to be heard. Her eyes filled with tears, but I felt cold and distant. I needed answers, not tears. "I'm sorry, Alex. I never wanted to hurt you," she said, and her words sounded hollow. The truth was there, naked and raw, and I didn't know how to deal with it. What was once love was now an open wound, and I couldn't wait to heal it, even if it meant even greater pain. I sat at the dining room table, the weight of Sarah's betrayal still pulsing in my chest like a sharp blade, embedded and bleeding. The environment that used to be a haven of joy now felt like an empty, shadowy space, where every shadow reflected the pain I felt. The day was cloudy, just like my heart, and the sound of rain hitting the window only increased the feeling of desolation. I looked at the cell phone on the table, its screen glowing with unread messages, but none of them interested me. What could be said that wasn't already clear? Sarah's betrayal of Mark, her former coworker, was an undeniable truth that I couldn't ignore. How could she do this to me? I muttered to myself, as memories of happy times together flashed through my mind. Our laughs, the plans made, the dream of the wedding that seemed so close, now disappearing like smoke. Anger began to build in me, a flame that intensified with each passing thought. I felt humiliated, but also empowered by the knowledge that I needed to take action. I stood up abruptly, chair scraping across the floor, and walked over to my computer. The idea of exposing Sarah on social media came as a flash of justice. She needs to understand what she did, I thought, as I opened the page to create a new post. My fingers were shaking, but it wasn't just nervousness that took over me. It was the need for release, to shout to the world what had happened. I started typing, words spilling out of me as if they had been stuck for too long. Today was supposed to be a day of joy, but my heart is in pieces. I discovered that the woman I loved, who was about to become my wife, cheated on me with my former coworker, Mark. The pain is unbearable, and I can no longer remain silent. I looked at the text. The words seemed like an echo of my pain, and a wave of relief washed over me. It was like I was finally taking control of the situation. "Let's see how she handles the consequences," I muttered to myself as I pressed the publish button. The clicking sound resounded like thunder, and anxiety washed over me. I knew I had crossed a line, but it was a step I felt was necessary. In the minutes that followed, my cell phone began to vibrate incessantly. Friends and family started commenting, sharing, offering support, but also asking questions that I didn't want to answer. "Alex, are you okay? What happened? How can this be true?" Messages flooded my screen, but I could barely process it all. What was once a celebration had now turned into a public spectacle of pain and shame. As I watched people's reactions, a mixture of relief and sadness settled in my heart. It was as if part of me was screaming for justice, while another part was mourning the way it had all turned out. I saw friends speaking out in support, others expressing shock, and even some who dared to criticize my decision to expose Sarah. She deserved this, didn't she? I asked myself, without an answer. The silence in the house was deafening, and the only thing I could hear was the sound of the rain that continued to fall outside, as if the world was mourning along with me. After a while, the cell phone stopped vibrating. I sat back at the table, the feeling that I had made an irrevocable decision beginning to settle in me. What would happen now? I didn't know, but the only thing I was sure of was that there was no return. With my head full of thoughts, I looked out the window and saw the raindrops running down, like the tears I hadn't shed yet. Life, somehow, would go on, and I was finally ready to face whatever came next. The impact of what I had done still resonated in my mind, like an incessant echo that wouldn't leave me alone. The post I wrote seemed to have become a virus, spreading quickly among friends and acquaintances. My hand was still shaking as I remembered the moment I pressed publish, as if I was unleashing a storm. The phone kept ringing, but I didn't have the courage to answer it. Sarah's face, pale and desolate, invaded my thoughts, and the idea of seeing her again made me anxious. "Alex, are you okay?" asked Lucas, my best friend, as he watched me closely in the living room. He had been one of the few people who knew what was going on, and his concern was palpable. "I don't know, man. I feel weird," I replied, collapsing onto the couch as the reality of the consequences began to dawn in front of me. She cheated on me, Lucas. With him. And now her life has fallen apart. You did what you thought was right. No one deserves to be deceived like that, he said, trying to comfort me, but I could hear the doubt in his voice. But what about you? How are you going to deal with this? The truth is, I didn't know. The anger and pain still consumed me, but there was a part of me that felt strangely empowered by having exposed the truth. I don't know, maybe I went too far. I just wanted her to feel some of what I felt. As we talked, the front door creaked open, and I knew it was Sarah. The sound of her unsteady walking echoed down the hall, and a shiver ran down my spine. She entered the room with a lost look, as if she were looking for something that had been lost forever. "Alex," she began, her voice shaky. "Please listen to me." I could not. The sight of her made me feel a mixture of anger and compassion. "What do you want me to say, Sarah? That I'm willing to ignore all of this? That I can just forget what you did?" "No, it's not that. I just wanted to explain," she insisted, tears in her eyes. I was confused. Mark showed up and I don't know how it happened. "Confused?" I shouted, my voice echoing through the room. "Do you think that's an excuse? You betrayed me, Sarah, and now your poor father got fired because of it. Don't you think about the consequences of your actions?" She hesitated, and I could see the pain on her face. "I didn't know he would talk to my family. He shouldn't have done that. Alex, please, I'm not a bad person. I made a mistake, but I love you." "Love? What do you know about love?" I replied, feeling the weight of the words. "You broke my trust in the cruelest way possible. What did you expect? That I would just turn the page and forget?" Her expression changed, and I realized that the pain I felt was also present in her. She fell into a heavy silence, and the tension between us was almost palpable. I wanted to believe she was sorry, but the pain of betrayal still kept me at a distance. "Alex," Lucas interjected, realizing the situation was escalating, "maybe it would be better if you step away for a bit." No, I need to solve this now," I said, determined, but I didn't know how. Sarah's presence confused me, and the idea that what she had done was real made me furious. "You can't solve everything like this. Sometimes the best thing you can do is take a step back and think," Lucas said, trying to calm me down. As I turned to face Sarah again, I noticed that her gaze was filled with despair. "I didn't want all of this to happen, Alex. I didn't want to hurt you. I was lost and now I don't know what to do." The weight of her guilt hung in the air, and a part of me wanted to comfort her, but the pain of her betrayal was an obstacle I couldn't ignore. "You need to deal with this alone, Sarah. I can't be your support right now," I replied, feeling the sadness in my own voice. She nodded slowly, as if every word I said was a knife to her heart. "I understand. I I just don't know how to live with this. And with that, she left the room, leaving a trail of despair that seemed to fill the entire space around her. I looked at Lucas, who was also silent. The consequences were already unfolding, and what was once a promising future now seemed like a dark abyss before me. I knew Sarah's life was changing, but mine was also transforming in ways I couldn't yet understand. The pressure of what had happened over the last few days was still pulsing inside me like a deafening drum. Sarah, with her smile that used to light up my life, was now just a shadow of what I knew. The public humiliation she faced consumed me in a strange way. On the one hand, I felt a certain relief at having exposed the truth, but on the other, there was a weight of compassion that made me question whether I had gone too far. That morning, while I was drinking my coffee, my friend Lucas called me. "What's up, Alex? How are you dealing with all this?" His voice was a mix of concern and curiosity. I took a deep breath and looked out the window, watching the leaves slowly fall. "I don't know, man. It's like the whole world is watching a tragic movie, and I'm the protagonist in a role I didn't choose," I replied, feeling the bitterness in every word. "You did what you thought was right. Sarah betrayed you, and everyone needs to know who she really is," Lucas insisted. "But have you thought about the consequences? Her father lost his job because of you." I hesitated. The weight of responsibility was suffocating me. I didn't want this to happen, but she had her choices, and now she's paying for them. The conversation soon turned to other topics, but the anguish never left my mind. After hanging up, I kept thinking about Mark, the man who had taken advantage of Sarah's weakness. He was always an ambitious guy, but now I realized that his ambition went beyond what I imagined. The idea that he might be involved in something darker started to take shape in my head. What if he wasn't just a traitor, but someone who manipulated and used those around him? I decided I needed to know more. I remembered that my former boss, Mr. Ribeiro, always had a keen eye on what was happening in the company. He knew everything, and would definitely have information about Mark. I picked up my phone and called him. "Hi, Mr. Ribeiro. Can you find me? I need a favor." He agreed, and we arranged a meeting for later. When I arrived at the cafe, he was already sitting at a table, looking thoughtfully at the window. "Alex, what happened to you is sad. But tell me, what do you want to know about Mark?" He got straight to the point. "I have a feeling he's not what he seems. Sarah isn't the only one who might be in trouble." Those words lit a fire inside me. "Do you know anything? Any problems with him?" Mr. Ribeiro's look became serious. "Actually, yes. He's had some harassment complaints in the past. People are afraid to talk, but I always suspected he was doing something illegal." My heart raced. "Do you have proof of this?" He nodded. "Yes, I have documents and some statements that could be useful. But you need to be sure of what you are doing, Alex. This could become a huge scandal." I knew I was at a point of no return. The pain Sarah caused me couldn't be erased, but maybe I could do something that would make her understand the depth of her actions. "I'm willing to move on," I declared. "If Mark needs to be exposed, then so be it." As we talked, the idea of revenge began to take shape in my mind. It wasn't just about getting revenge on Sarah. It was about unmasking Mark and everything he stood for. What he did to Sarah was just a fragment of a pattern of behavior that needed to be exposed. When I left the cafe, a new determination burned in my chest. It wasn't just Sarah's actions that needed to have consequences. Mark also needed to face the truth. I was ready to face the confrontation that would change everything. Life was about to take me down a path I never imagined, but I was determined not to let this betrayal define me. It was time to fight. The morning light streamed through the windows of my apartment, but I couldn't feel the energy of the new day. The anger and betrayal still burned in my chest, like a fire I couldn't put out. After discovering Sarah's betrayal, I had made the decision to confront Mark and expose not only the infidelity, but also the dark side he was hiding behind his confident smile. It was time to act. That morning, I met at a cafe with my former boss, Carlos. He was always a man of principle, and even after he left the company, we stayed in touch. When I told him about Sarah's betrayal and connection with Mark, his face fell. "Alex, this is serious. What you need to know is that Mark is not just a traitor. He is dangerous," he said, his voice deep. "Dangerous how?" I asked, intrigued. He told me about a harassment scheme that Mark had kept secret. Several company employees had spoken out, but no one believed them. If you have proof, we can take it public, Carlos suggested, his gaze hardening. The fire inside me lit again, now with a new purpose. After a few hours of conversations and investigations, we managed to gather documents and messages that could incriminate Mark. I felt a mix of anxiety and relief knowing that I wasn't alone in this. With the evidence in hand, we decided the best place to confront him would be at a company meeting. He would never expect me to show up. On the appointed afternoon, my heart was beating fast as I headed to the headquarters of the company where I worked. As I entered the meeting room, I saw Mark surrounded by colleagues, his self-confident stance a slap in the face. He didn't see me coming, but the feeling of power I had being there, ready to expose him, was indescribable. "Mark," I called, making everyone turn around. The silence in the room was palpable. "We need to talk." He frowned in surprise, but maintained his pose. "What do you want, Alex? Are you lost without Sarah?" he said, with a mocking smile. "In truth, no. I'm here to talk about you and your actions." I placed the proofs on the table, the sheets scattering like a storm of revelations. "What you did to those employees is unacceptable. What about Sarah? You betrayed her and manipulated her." The room was completely silent. The expressions changed, and disbelief took over the environment. Mark tried to defend himself, but with every word that left his mouth, I could feel the tension rising. "You don't know what you're talking about. He's just hurt that he was left out," he said, but his voice was already shaking. "Actually, I know very well. And today, you will be exposed. Not just for cheating, but for being an abuser." The room began to murmur, and I saw Sarah, who was far away, hearing everything. Her face was pale, and I realized she was there, witnessing the fall of the man who deceived her. And then, as if a thread snapped inside her, Sarah stood up, her eyes full of determination. "Mark, I can't be by your side any longer. I was used and manipulated. You're not who I thought you were." His words echoed through the room, and the shock was palpable. Mark was now surrounded not just by me, but by the truth he could no longer hide. As Sarah walked away from him, free at last, I felt a weight lift from my soul. What began as betrayal and pain was now turning into liberation. I looked to the future and saw new possibilities. Revenge wasn't just about what Mark did to me or Sarah, but about the strength we found in our pain. The room was in turmoil, but I knew that a new chapter in my life began. With a deep sigh, I left the room, feeling like I had finally taken control of my destiny. Mark might have tried to destroy me, but I was stronger than ever. And so I walked into a future that now seemed full of hope.